Oh, all right then. I'm sitting on top of those cliffs you can see on the front cover of the book at Yesnaby in Orkney. It's early in 1986. I'm not quite halfway through my 2-year solicitor's traineeship with Messrs TP and JL Lowe in Kirkwall, and I've come to my favourite weekend walking place with a sense that I have a decision to make. Yesnaby, let me say in case you've never been there, is a place for decisions. If any of you intends ever to propose marriage to me, do it at Yesnaby. I know nowhere more beautiful and awe-inspiring, and nowhere that more assures me of the relentlessness of the activity of God in our world. I know that in the middle of the night, when no one's there, those waves will keep crunching into those caves and sending spray over onto the lichen carpet along the top of those terrifying drops. Being put in my tiny place by that power so far beyond my controlling gives me a sense that my part in all this is so small that I really shouldn't fret about it. A decision is due for this not quite 24-year-old baby lawyer. The uncomfortable process I'll describe in the next chapter has taken me over 5 years, to the point at which the Plan A version of my imagined future is parish ministry in the Church of Scotland. To plan a journey, though, is not the same thing as switching on the ignition, and to imagine being a minister is not the same thing as saying it out loud to the church and beginning the process. I can still say no. I can still take the easier path, stay in a place I thoroughly enjoy. I can still occupy the profession my parents have supported me in entering. My parents whose attitude at this point is, why would you give up something secure that you know and change to something that might end up being a disaster? Though, fast forward 7 or 8 years, and to their credit, they say, you were right. We can see that now. If I say yes at this point, the next step will be one of application, assessment and decision by the church itself, and that involves being vulnerable to incisive questioning and testing, and the risk of not hearing the answer I want. That will then require me to work out what Plan B is for my professional life, and it will also take quite a bit out of me emotionally. So, yes is the harder path, but it's the one I feel is stretching out in front of me, and I have to find out where it goes. Oh, all right then. Almost drowned out by the crump of water on stone below, but no doubt heard all the same. That exclamation, or something like it, must be the turning point of every life that ends up in Christian ministry. And after that, it's like setting foot on a playground slide on an icy day. There's no stopping and little control, and who knows where I'm going to end up. And all of that ending up is what this book will try to describe. For more than half the length of my ministry, people have listened to me telling some story in which I am the foolish anti-hero, and have responded by saying I ought to write my stories down. Write the book. Until now, I've resisted their flattery for 2 reasons. First, so many of the stories also involve other people as protagonists that it could be difficult, I have often joked, to avoid defamation suits. There are other ministers almost as hapless as I am, but they may not want that to become known, that kind of thing. Second, I can't imagine that it's a good use of anyone's time to be reading a biography of this muddle of a soul, nor would I want my life to be commended as an example of anything much. But recently I had reason to see the reading list given to those going through our current process of discernment of vocation to ministry. And I realised that its compilers, no fault of theirs, had been provided with very little that was directly useful to members of the Church of Scotland. It suddenly seemed to me that if I wrote the book, but made it clear that its subject is the ministry and not one particular minister, I might be able to plug a little of that gap. The privileges, adventures, errors of my 30+ years of ordained service will be the quarry of examples I will use. So you will probably learn things about me you didn't know you needed to know. Sorry about that. And I figure I can probably confine myself to stories in which the other characters look good, so I won't worry about that after all. Those in discernment for our ministry then are one target readership for this little volume. Another is much more numerous, and it's the members of our church who would like to find out a bit more about the mysterious topic of what it is their minister is actually doing, and to celebrate the work of the whole ministry of the denomination they call their kirk, and take some pride and pleasure in being part of Christ's church, reaching into so many nooks and crannies of life in Scotland and beyond. Bottom line up front, as they say in the world of slick corporate presentations, here is the nutshell argument of everything you're about to read. The ordained ministry of the Church of Scotland, and I dare say of any denomination, is the most extraordinarily varied life, which is only as limited as your imagination and desire make it. I have lost count of the pickles in which I have found myself, thinking, New College didn't think to prepare me for this. And almost all of those pickles are ones that I am, well, in retrospect, glad I experienced. The corollary of that truth is that to be a fully functioning, mentally healthy minister, you need to bring a variety of skills and gifts, not knowing which of them you will use from moment to moment. Piety is grand, but not enough, and the talents you have been given will serve you well sometime, somehow. And if that speaks of adaptability, it means you'll also need to be open to being changed by the experience. Now, in part, that's about the readiness to attend to all those different demands and unexpected scenarios. In part, it's about the willingness to be affected, changed, reorientated by your formation for ministry and your experience of the work. In part, whether we like it or not, it's about the realism of knowing that we minister in a church that is drastically changing and shrinking, in which we need to maintain our confidence, keep the faith, and follow the vocation through. Some of the topics that follow will interest you more than others, so let me give you the timeline I've used to arrange the chapters that follow in case you want to focus on a particular one. 1986, June, the month in which I turned 24, I completed the church's selection process. Chapter 1, Vocation. 1987 to 90, I studied for a Bachelor of Divinity degree at New College, Edinburgh. Chapter 2, Formation for Ministry. 1990 to 92, my probationary period, and then an ordained assistantship in Fairmile Head Church, Edinburgh, also Chapter 2. 1992 to 98, I was Minister of Stromness and Graemsay in Orkney. That's Chapter 3, entitled Stromness and Graemsay. And during this ministry, I also served, in the latter years of it, as part-time Deputy Clerk of the General Assembly. And that's Chapter 4, entitled 121 and the General Assembly. Chapter 4 also covers my time from 1998 to 2010 as full-time Deputy Clerk. And during this appointment, I studied part-time for a PhD from New College. Chapter 5 is entitled Studying, Thinking, Speaking, Writing. After that, I joined the Royal Naval Reserve as a chaplain. Chapter 6, Royal Naval Reserve. And in 2010 to 11, I was mobilised as a chaplain in the Royal Navy. That's covered in Chapter 6 as well. From 2011 to 2020, I was Minister of Abernight, linked with Inchiture and Kinnaird, linked with Longforgan, in what was then Dundee Presbytery, Chapter 7, the Carse of Gowrie. And during this ministry, I continued to serve in the RNR until 2017, my 55th birthday, and I held various committee memberships and convenerships within the Church's governance structures, and that's touched on briefly in Chapter 8, miscellaneous thoughts. From 2020 until now, I've been the Minister of Sothrunalsie and Bury in Orkney. Chapter 9 is entitled SRB and HW, because at the time of writing I am interim moderator of Hoy and Walls, HW, and I anticipate those two parishes being brought together in a more organic way in the team ministry that's planned to begin in October 2024. Right then, I promised stories of things the university did not prepare me to experience. So let me start with one of those "you couldn't make this up" moments. One that happened just before Christmas 2023. And like all of my stories in the coming pages, it's not hilarious, it's just a memorable little episode. As part of those radical changes we're all enduring in the church, the wise and brave Kirk Session of Hoy and Walls Parish had taken the necessary steps to divest that church of its last historic church building there, and to consolidate all the worship and activity in the modern bungalow known as Kirkside that stands in the curtilage of the original building. Disciplined decisions were taken about the destination of the contents of the church. The communion table, that was already in Kirkside's brand new conservatory. The memorial plaque for the 1969 Longhope lifeboat disaster was destined for the Lifeboat Museum nearby. Even wood from a pew once sat on by Her Majesty the Queen Mother would be fashioned into a tabletop lectern. That left the font. The early 20th century, much loved, generously gifted, and this is the critical point, sandstone font. I'll show you a picture of it in a few pages' time. It's a work of art. It's a treasured artefact resonating with generations of worship. But you won't think me crass if I say that one of the most positive things you can also say about it is that it was made in two octagonal sections, one sitting flush on top of the other. Thank goodness for that. When Kirkside had been extended to include the conservatory, the local builder was asked to ensure that the floor of the new area would be strong enough to take a very heavy weight in one corner. Ask me in a few years whether his assurances were vindicated. It may take some time to know for sure. For that, it was decided, would be the destination of the font. But how to move it? On a small island with a population of only 450 and no engineering firms. Half in jest, someone on the Kirk Session wondered whether the lifeboat crew might appreciate a training exercise, but such a ridiculous notion was left hanging in the air. There I was then in mid-Advent, spending a few nights in the house to do some Christmassy services and some pastoral visits. "Oh, by the way," said one of the session, "note to future ministers, that's usually a warning signal for something bad or mad, just saying. The fire brigade will call round after tea time tomorrow." Well, it took 6 of them 3/4 of an hour to move the thing about 30 yards, slinging each half below scaffolding poles with straps and ropes and clever knots, trundling it on rollers across the parking space, squeezing it through the conservatory door, and putting all their back muscles on the line to hoist the top bit onto the bottom bit and then get the 8 corners aligned. The session clerk, aged 90, so definitely exempt, and I, aged 61 and determined to be exempt too, stood back, making encouraging noises. A voice came out of the scrum of effort. "Promise us neither of you intends ever to move this again." And that, dear reader, is what being a Church of Scotland minister feels like. And I hope you enjoy the other gentle stories I have to tell you.